So I just want to welcome everyone to the STEM Career Symposium, and this is our third virtual activity for STEM Week here at STIC. And I just want to welcome everybody. I am the Dean of STEM here. I am actually a female engineer. I have degrees in electrical engineering and laser optics engineering as well. It's a wonderful career for females and minorities to get into, and I'm just so excited to be able to be in this position so that I can also hope I give hope for some of the females and minorities that could be in this field. So my email is everywhere. Just if any of the students that are listening, or high school students, ever think they don't even know what an engineer is or anything like that, feel free to shoot me an email. But I want to also just so excited today. I want to thank the panelists for coming here, and obviously President Cook and Lieutenant Governor Polito and Rena for putting together such a great program. Welcome and enjoy the talk.
Thank you, Barbara. To our panelists again, and as well, thank you so much for joining us this morning. This is a wonderful week. It is very much championed by the governor and lieutenant governor, and I'll be happy to provide an introduction. I too want to just echo my thanks and appreciation to Dean Barbara Washburn, Professor Rena Van Der, who really championed science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. We are a pretty unique institution with a very unique student body. We are majority women and majority of color. And as you heard from Barbara and you'll hear from Rena, we really do champion access and equity. We have, I think, one of the few chapters of the Society of Women Engineers at STCC. I think a real signature example of the way that our faculty have really led out these conversations. You know, I think in a world that is still and clearly going to be dominated by COVID, I think about this intersection that we'll likely hear from our panelists between engineering, manufacturing, and healthcare, that there is a sort of integration, synergy that is needed. And I think about some of the signature programs that STCC offers, things like mechanical engineering technology. That's really essentially our dominant manufacturing program that we have. We also have a photonics, essentially a laser and optics program, pretty unique in New England, and also electrical and robotics. And we see these three contributions to that manufacturing presence is pretty vital. It was before COVID, and it will be afterwards. To say nothing of some of the other health programs that we have, certainly a large and well-known nursing program, for example. So I'm very much looking forward to the conversations and where we lead. Let me turn it over to our Lieutenant Governor, who joins us for a second day in a row, which we are so grateful for, Lieutenant Governor Polito. She is no stranger to Western Massachusetts. She is a tremendous supporter of all things STEM. And again, thrilled to have you join us this morning. Thank you.
Well, thank you, President Cook, and thank you, Dean Washburn, and thank all of you at STIC. I think we have some friends from Harvard University, as well as UMass, part of this. And we've got some great panelists and a great audience. And I just want to thank all of you for spending a few minutes to focus on how to choose a STEM career. I mean, how do you choose a job or a career? And I think there's a difference between the two. We talked about that over the course of this STEM week. A job might be something you have to do. A career is something you feel inside you're really excited to do. When some of the careers might not even exist today in this innovation economy. But let me just talk briefly, why is STEM Week important to me as your Lieutenant Governor? Well, prior to me becoming the Lieutenant Governor with Governor Baker, I was in the Massachusetts legislature, and I knew early on that it was really important to gain access for girls and communities of color to science and math curriculum and subjects. I was hearing too many times in my community that girls were shying away from these subjects in middle school because they didn't have the encouragement and the support to help them understand the importance of these subjects, that they had an ability in these subjects, that they stay with this subject, and it will lead them to more opportunity. Fast forward, I started a science conference for girls, and I got a whole lot of wonderful women in these great jobs and careers come to this conference to inspire the girls that you can see yourself in a position like this. And this is how you might get from where you are today to one of these incredible careers where you make a difference in your community and people's lives in terms of health and in the world. So now I have this amazing opportunity to co-chair the STEM Council which is something I really wanted to do with the governor and with my co-chairs, Jeffrey Leiden at Vertex and Congressman Joe Kennedy. And now on a statewide effort, able to really focus on STEM education. And the reason it's important is, first of all, when you look at this Massachusetts economy, everything about it involves something STEM. I mean, look at this time in which we are living. We are all living through the challenge of a pandemic. And right in front of us is everything around science and data. It is exactly how Governor Baker and I and our team are managing through the response and recovery from COVID-19, basing our decisions and grounding ourselves on the science and the data. Look at the people who in March and April, our nurses, our doctors, our frontline people who went out and did their jobs because they are talented people that understood science and medicine and to help us. How about the need for face coverings and gowns and gloves, and our front line wanting to go do their jobs, but they needed to have the equipment to be safe in doing so, to protect themselves and their families and their coworkers. So we had manufacturers in Massachusetts that might have been making one thing, kind of retool their whole manufacturing line to make right here in our Commonwealth, because we weren't able to get the supply from other places, our own masks and gowns and gloves and ventilators. I mean, that's just amazing effort. And of course, now as we kind of see the light at the end of this tunnel, although it's a little bit in the distance, we have scientists in our laboratories researching therapies and treatments and vaccines that will help us all live through the pandemic and post-pandemic time. All of that is science, technology, engineering, and math. And it doesn't take a pandemic for us to realize how important this is, okay? You have all been working in this area to help our Commonwealth develop the workforce needed to fuel our innovation economy. And it's really important that we create this talent so that we can continue to grow the jobs and opportunities, but also to answer some of the big challenges of our society and of our day, whether if it's healthcare or environmental or other. And we need people to do these jobs. And these jobs and careers can't just be filled with people that don't have the abilities and the skills. So you need access to the curriculum and the subject matter to become expertise in it. You definitely need to have the curriculum. And that's why we've opened up opportunities around AP science, computer science and coding and all of those things. But you also need to have what we think of as experiential learning, like not only academically understand the concepts, but how do you apply them to real world problems? And that's where STIC has been really instrumental in helping our administration understand that experiential learning piece. Before pandemic, we were Governor and I, in many classrooms throughout our Commonwealth, taking things like CNC machines and 3D printers and putting them in classrooms so kids could have that experiential learning. And one of the innovations of this pandemic time is that many of you as educators have figured out how to do this virtually, getting some of these things into the hands of kids at home in this virtual learning environment. So thank you for pivoting on that. But that experiential learning is really critical to understand how to critically think, problem solve, work collaboratively as a team to get to the outcome that's needed. And then finally, I just know what you're talking about today is how do I know I'm good at science and math. I know I have to study hard. I know I can get I can graduate from school, but then what? How do I make the connection? And that's why the STEM starter academies that we have in our community colleges, the innovation pathways for a middle schooler and an early high schooler to say, I can take this set of courses and it will lead me on this path to maybe this science career or this math career, but you have to start thinking about that early on. And how do I know that I really like this? And that's why the internships and the mentorships and employers opening up their workplaces so you as students can kind of really see yourself in one of these places is critically important. And then of course, As proud as we are of the talent pipeline in Massachusetts, it is not diverse enough. 76% of our STEM workforce is white. We need to be intentional about recruiting and nudging and encouraging and asking girls and communities of color early on to engage in these pathways and make decisions around STEM careers for their future. And the reason I, as your Lieutenant Governor, care about that so much is because I want to make sure that STEM is not just a thing, but it's real for you and that it brings you the opportunities that you deserve. STEM careers are meaningful because you can make an impact on something that's important, but they also bring more meaning to your own lives and you deserve it. So this is going to be a great discussion today. We're in the mid of STEM week. We've had some amazing events, and just don't limit them to STEM week. We go STEM week and beyond from here. So I'll just turn it back to you and look forward to hearing the discussion.
So our first speaker is Dr. Trisha Andrews from UMass. So she will share her STEM story. Trisha?
Thank you, Rena, for including me in this lineup. It's really amazing to see over 100 people attending this on a random Wednesday morning, so that's really exciting. Welcome to all of you. My name is Trisha. I'm a professor at the University of Massachusetts Amherst. I moved there from the University of Wisconsin a couple years ago to be closer to my family. We're from the kind of Worcester area. And I'm a professor in the departments of chemistry and chemical engineering at UMass, and my formal training is listed here. Just so you kind of understand where I came from, I'll kind of talk a little bit more about this, but my formal training is in the areas of chemistry and electrical engineering. I have a double degree because I really like this stuff because I thought it was super fun, and so I decided to get 2 degrees on it. And my lab, my research lab, I run a research lab at UMass. It's called the Wearable Electronics Lab, and that's our website. I made it. I'm very proud of it, so please check it out. And we work on something called smart garments, which is a way to take the clothing that you're used to wearing every day and transforming them into sensors for your health. From small things like, are you sleeping well, to big things like, actually, are you exposed to a virus particle, obviously because of recent events. And our major kind of technique that we use that I'm happy to talk about, but it's a little too kind of nerdy even for me, is to use a process called reactive vapor deposition, which is shown by the cartoon on the bottom right on the screen. And that's something that we developed in the lab doing our science in order to actually make these garments. And the cool thing about that process, or the uniqueness about that process, is that we could just take any shirt or fabric or purse or bag or whatever you want, and we could actually grow devices directly on it and then give it back to you. And you could use that as you normally would. You could wash it, you could sweat in it, wash it, put it in the dryer, and it will still feel the same. It'll still act the same, except it is now electronic. It is now a sensor for something that we built for you. And so that is basically what we do. And it's a ton of fun to play around with. So let me see, I think the next one here, this is just a little bit of stuff that we've done that I'm proud of lately over the past, I guess, couple years. This is my lab. It's a bit of an older picture. We couldn't take a new picture recently because we obviously couldn't stay within 6 feet of each other and fit within the frame of a picture, but this is about a year old. These are the students in my lab. Something I'm very proud of is we are very diverse. So these are all graduate students and postdoctoral researchers. So they are pursuing their PhD or their postdoctoral, post their PhD training with me in my lab at UMass. And this is one of the shirts that we made that we kind of keep adding all of the devices that we've made onto there. And that's our lab logo, the We Lab right here. And this is a cartoon showing all the devices that we've made. And these are some pictures showing you things we've done. This is a thermoelectric band. So as you wear it, the body heat that your body is generating, if it's hotter than outside, especially in the wintertime in Massachusetts, you could actually use that as a power source to charge up your batteries in very small electronics like your phone or maybe your watch. And then this is a battery. It's actually a fiber-based battery that you could sew onto your clothes to, again, store that charge. So in case your phone is fine now, but later on you need to charge it, you could actually just sort of try and hook it up to this fiber battery that's on the textile over there, or it can also look like a patch. Some of the other things that we do is to integrate all of these devices into a complete garment. And these are some GIFs of some of the garments that we made that we are doing or using in studies in our lab at UMass. On the right is a sleep shirt. The blue shirt is actually a electronic garment. And again, you can't see anything, any wires there. That's how we make our devices. It's just a shirt, but it actually has sensors on the inside surface that tell you your heart rate and your respiration. And as you're sleeping, you get that data basically. And so you could tell at the end of the night if you've had a good night's sleep or not, or if you've been very restless. And then on the very bottom is an eye mask. The eyes are cut out just to show you that you could get a signal as you're moving your eye. It's actually the one that we use is fully covered, so you could wear the mask and the shirt as you're sleeping. And together you get an idea of your sleep stage and your posture and your breathing throughout the night. And that allows doctors to understand, again, if you have chronic sleep illnesses or if you have respiration problems or cardiac problems that are really manifesting as you're sleeping at night. And lately, we've taken those same devices and put them on a mask, and that's what is shown in the cartoon on the top there. And that mask allows you basically to monitor your breathing rate. And we could tell if you're having trouble breathing, if you're constantly trying to take deep breaths and you're not getting that air volume inside your lungs, which is something that you will experience if you've basically contracted a respiratory virus. And a few colleagues of mine at UMass, as soon as the state had to shut down to contain the spread, we actually got some rapid funding from the federal government to develop a rapid test on a textile or a cotton swab that turns magenta if you've been exposed to the virus. And that's the cartoon shown on the very top over here. And we, again, my colleague Ty Monovan and I and Jeannie Hardy, all at UMass, are part of the task force, as the governor mentioned, of doing testing on our campus to basically prevent the spread of this virus in our area. So that has been some stuff that we've been doing. So anyways, how did I get here? The thing is, I heard a lot of people talking about how hard science is. And I guess that's a popular way of thinking about it. But, you know, I kind of disagree. Every time people say that science is hard, I guess you do have to pay attention. But the thing is, science is fun. And that's actually how I got into it. It's just a way to go into a workshop with a bunch of super cool tools. Sometimes they're super expensive and you have to be careful, but just a lot of toys to play with and no schedule that you need to work with. And you just get to putter around. And if everything's going well, what you've puttered around in actually helps society. And you get to train people and you get to work with people who are really excited about what they're doing. And that's how I got into it. I was pre-med. I thought I was going to be a doctor. And so I knew I needed to take science classes, but I honestly, I hated biology. I truly hated biology. And I realized that I did not care about human anatomy. And so I thought maybe I shouldn't be a doctor. And so I found this professor when I was an undergraduate at the University of Washington in Seattle. Her name is Natia Frank, and that's her picture on the left there. So she has a lab. And I just randomly cold emailed her and said, can I work in your lab? Like, I did not know what that meant, but I just knew that I didn't like learning about biology. And so she was in chemistry, and I was like, she probably doesn't do biology. So I'm going to just email her and see if, and she was, the reason I emailed her was she was only one of 2 female faculty at the time. It's not that long ago at the University of Washington. And she was like, yes. I don't know why. You have to ask her. I've never had the courage to ask her why she said yes to a random person saying, can I work in your lab? But she did. And she exposed me to this field that I work in, which is called organic electronics, which is the idea of using polymers as electronic materials. And that allows you to actually put all these devices on crazy things like your clothing or paper which you can't do with normal silicon microelectronics, which is how our conventional electronic devices, including the computer we're all are on, is made. And working with her, I realized, again, I was just in the lab with a grad student mentoring me, and I just was able to, they'd tell me to do something and I had no idea how to do it, but they just left me alone and I kind of figured it out. And I was like, this is fun. And that's how I learned science, actually. I did take courses, but by the time I actually took the courses, I'd already figured it out by myself in the lab, working in Natia's lab. And to me, that's how science is learned. Science is a functional thing that you do with your hands. It's not a course. And so when students come now, when grad students apply to my lab, and they always tell me, or undergrads actually ask me about their grades, I don't care. I honestly don't know what a grade means. I mean, I understand that it's necessary for a lot of stuff, but I just tell people to go spend an hour in the lab and see if they can figure out a problem, because ultimately that's what scientists do. And working with Natia, the other great thing about actually learning and training in science in the United States, this is not true in a lot of other countries in the world, is that you're, as a student, you're actually paid to get your degree. So I didn't know that. And I first found out that I could actually get paid to just have fun in the lab when I was working in Natia. So everything that's highlighted in red here are fellowships that I won. The Mary Gates Fellowship was something that I got as an undergraduate researcher because I was doing research, and they basically paid my tuition. And so I was able to graduate with my parents having to only have paid 1 quarter. University of Washington was in a quarter system of tuition. And so I basically graduated with 2 degrees debt-free, which obviously was, I didn't care that much, but it was obviously something that was really great for my parents because they didn't have to pay for my education. And then also I didn't realize that if you go get your PhD in science, your research advisor that you have to work with actually pays your salary. It's a stipend, it's not a salary, but I paid nothing. And so again, I was effectively paid to work in a lab, which I thought was just fun. And then I got a degree at the end of it. And that was the 2 fellowships that are highlighted in the center. And then you actually have to start getting a job, either in academia or in industry. And there are a lot of opportunities to do that with a PhD, especially in the Massachusetts area. I decided to try my hand at doing 1 more year of postdoctoral training, and I did that with Vladimir Bulovich, who's shown on the right, and I actually won a different fellowship from the American Association for the Advancement of Science, which is this L'Oreal fellowship, which is really awesome because that allowed me to, I'll just skip forward here, to go visit the Senate in DC, and we got this award in the Robert Kennedy wing of the Senate, which was awesome. And I spoke at the podium that has his name and a plaque on it, and that's my parents on the bottom, and they were invited, and it was this huge ball, and it was just the best. It was like one of the greatest experiences that I had the opportunity to live through, which is awesome. And again, it was money given to me, and then they had this ball for me, which I was like, that's great. So let me tell you why science is fun before I hand the ball off. So this is some stuff that I did, again, while I was being paid to get my PhD as a graduate student. We were working on a method this is back when we were still occupying Iraq. And so we were working on a method to detect IEDs. And we realized that a lot of the explosives actually have some very unique chemistry that does not mimic other compounds that are found in the air or found in the soil in these regions where we have active theaters. And so we developed a kind of chemistry. We developed a chromophore, a dye that is actually colorless until it contacted an explosive vapor, and it changed color. And that's the picture that you're seeing in the center over here. That tiny spot is actually a nanogram. That's very, very, very little of this explosive that's found in IEDs. And this chromophore is clear, that's the background, except in that one spot where we expose it to this puff of that explosive vapor and it actually turns yellow. And so this was licensed by a company that is now national, and it has changed its name. It wasn't FLIR when it started, but they licensed it to this technology that they called Fido because it's an electronic dog. And this is a soldier using this in Oklahoma, Stillwater, Oklahoma, to sniff out buried IEDs. And this was all work that I did, science that I developed as a graduate student. And so I realized that I'm getting money to work in a lab and do science that I thought was fun. And at the end of the day, we actually got this technology licensed by a company and used in an active theater at the time by society, so that by the United States Army, which was super great. And then we were able to move this to a slightly different kind of chemistry. And we're able to, instead of look at buried IEDs, look at peroxides in airports. And so this is another kind of version that was commercialized by FIDO for airport monitoring. And I just looking at the time here. So anyways, that was the realized for me that any work that you do in the lab can actually have potential to not only make you money, but to generate jobs and to create small businesses. And so in my postdoc, we actually decided, instead of selling our work to a company, having a pre-existing company license our technology like we had with our explosives work, we decided, me, my colleagues, and my advisor decided to start our own company. And this one is called Ubiquitous Energy. It's based out of California, and we make solar windows. This is one of the panels that our company makes that's held by our CEO, my former workmate, who's now in charge of the company full time. This is actually a solar cell. It's also a window, but it's also a solar cell. And so if you put these transparent panels in places like your house or a garage, you could generate a small amount of power as the sun is shining through that window. And the way this works is the sun puts out a lot of different kinds of wavelength of light. We just think it's transparent because we have a very narrow window of vision. And as long as we can get the other wavelengths, we're good to go. So you can still be clear and generate energy from the sun. Lastly, I just want to end by going back to my lab at UMass here. So the wearable electronics lab and my students, and we make our smart garments. So these are some pictures that I took in a rush in my lab. These are some of the toys that we have. These are not all of them. These are only some of them. And like I said, this is why I think science is fun. We just get to play with a bunch of like chambers. And some days it sucks because we're plumbers and we're just fixing a leak, literally a leak in something. It could maybe be a gas that you shouldn't breathe, but sometimes it's just chiller water in our chillers. Sometimes we're incredibly sophisticated scientists and we're playing with chemistry that no one's worked with. And the other times we're just problem solvers trying to figure out if we got our logic right or wrong. And it's very easy for people to work with us. This is a really great story. This is Emerson Alexander. She's actually a student from STIC. She worked with me in my lab for almost a year and a half. And she actually helped develop that mask that I was talking about much earlier that helps you actually track your eyes as you're sleeping at night. And so it was really cool that WLOP did a story on her because as soon as our paper came out, we put a press release and I highlighted her involvement in that. And so that was really fun. And lastly, we also started this whole idea of science leading to innovation. We decided to start a company about 2 years ago based on our work on wearable electronics. We're based in Charlestown. If you want to do an internship with us, that's our website up there. Feel free to drop me a line. So these are some pictures I took at the end of the day on the bottom. The left one is basically us being super sophisticated scientists and doing chemistry in our chambers. The right one is us being technicians, and we're sanding our chambers down after we did this fancy chemistry because we have to literally sandblast our work, our chambers, in order to keep going and to improve our manufacturing. And then the middle one is our sewing machine because we're making garments. And so all of the dudes in our company actually know how to sew and make different kinds of garments. So that's it for me. I think I'm really out of time. So all I want to say is, I think science is just fun because it's a lot of play that we get to do with a lot of fancy toys. And I think you should just do it because it is the most fun job that you could possibly have. Okay.
Rena, do we have time for comments or questions after each speaker? You're on mute. You're on mute, Rena.
Go ahead, we have a minute.
I won't be brief. I just want to be brief. Professor Andrew, thank you so much. You know, fair warning, by the way, our Lieutenant Governor is from Worcester area, so she may have some follow-up questions for you after this.
Please.
I don't mean to put her on the spot, but I know she is a true champion for all things Worcester. I really appreciate you noting the stick to UMass pathway. We do have that well in hand for our students who are on this call, and I appreciate you profiling Emerson. There is an affordability aspect to starting at a place like a community college. And then, by the way, maybe cold emailing you to ask if they can work in your lab, just as you did that as an undergraduate. I really appreciate that. I think it's also worth noting, and I do have a question, that your passion was not necessarily in biology, but in this interchange between engineering and chemistry, you found your passion. I offer that because what we hear sometimes from our students is I'm not good at, or I don't like. And they may have, let's say, had trouble with calculus, differential equations, but are phenomenal in statistics. And that doesn't mean they're bad at math. They're just different aspects to that subject area. And I think that's always a point worth stressing. My one question, if you have a minute, is how were you able to just put one day in front of the next, from the years you spent as an undergraduate, we'll just say that they were 4, to the 6 years of graduate work? That's a decade of how did you just live each week and stay within yourself and not worry too much about down the road? How did you find that?
That's a great question. I think a lot of my grad students also, like, there's a lot of chatter I find on Twitter about, you know, it's such a long slog. And when you think about 6 years, and when you say 6 years, I'm also like, oh my God, how did I do that? But the real answer is it never felt like 6 years to me. It felt like every day. You know, kind of like a Western Mass nerd, I love Thoreau. And I love, one of the things that on Walden Pond, one of my favorite lines is, you need to, the infinite expectation of the dawn, right? It's always just the day. You finish, you solve a problem every day, and you go to bed because you've been productive. You've solved the problem, and next day you're going to solve another one. And the next day you're going to solve another one after that. And as soon as you know it, you've come up with an explosive detection system, you've licensed your work, and you've had a PhD, and 6 years have passed by. And that's how it works for me. It's never been like, oh, I have 6 years to do this. It's always, tomorrow I'm going to solve this. And the other day day after I'm going to clean that after I don't solve it, but that's it. That's all I have to do. And that's, you know, that's life, right?
The one thing that strikes me is you're fearless. You're not afraid.
Nice for you to say. I don't think that, but
you're not afraid to try something and not succeed on the first attempt. I mean, and you said that's fun. Some people might get really frustrated by that experience, but you seem to be optimistic. You know, your glass is half full and try it again.
That's the great thing about science, right? Every failure tells you what not to do. Every failure is an accomplishment.
Excellent. Thank you, Trisha, so much. So Brian, Dr. Brian, next.
Okay, hi, everyone. All right, can you all see my screen, my slideshow? Great. Okay, so I'm Brian Levine. I'm a professor in the College of Information and Computer Sciences at UMass Amherst. This is one of my favorite pictures of campus, which looks so beautiful right now. I think the trees in this photo actually match the trees outside my house. Too bad can't quite be on campus yet, but it's beautiful every year. So by the time you all get there, it will look just like this. This is the building that I work in at UMass. It's, you know, summer view. UMass is just this beautiful campus. Here's one of my favorite buildings on campus. Somewhere in the middle, I think linguistics somehow stole this spot. It's right next to the campus center. UMass is this, you know, whether you're in computer science or any other STEM field, or even the humanities on our campus, it's just a very vibrant community. And I think what I love about working at UMass, and especially in STEM, is that I'll tell you so many things today that I love about it. But one of my favorite things is you always feel like you're doing something for society, and you're training yourself to do something for society. I think so many students can feel like, why am I in the subject? Why am I doing this? So I feel like computer science and the other STEM fields, it's this practical training, but at the same time, you're learning important principles about, I mean, even the universe or philosophy, about how things work, how we reason about things, and being able to do that into something practical, I feel is really important. So I'm going to come back to that. So what's funny is I'm in computer science, and you might think I have these amazing things to show off, but I don't. We just have these computers. And so here are some computers on people's desks. You might not know that down in Holyoke, there's the MGHPCC, the Massachusetts Green High Performance Computing Center. Probably, maybe you've even driven past it. It's a cooperative effort by 5 universities across the state, including UMass. This massive building that is purposefully next to the hydroelectric power that's generated in Holyoke. One of the interesting things about the MGHPCC, I think I did too many C's there, is that if you want really good computing, you need cheap power and you need a great on-ramp to the internet. You may not know that Springfield has one of the largest on-ramps to the internet in the nation. It has what's called a point of presence, or a POP. So that's why this is down there. It's a really innovative facility. This is just one of the rows, and each one of those cabinets contains massive computing power like you would not believe. So that's the best sort of toys that I have to show you. But let me tell you about some other stuff. So in computer science, we have a lot of degrees, probably the 2 that matter most to the audience in this call. We have a bachelor's in computer science. We also, so that's a BS or a BA. The difference isn't really important right now. But basically, this is where we teach really timeless principles and methods for computational thinking. And when I was young, people would talk about, there's math and there's chemistry. And by the way, you can use a computer for that. Well, I'm here to tell you that computational thinking is its own science. There's a reason that we're not just a department. We used to just be a department at UMass, but like many other universities and colleges across the nation, we have become a college of information and computer sciences because, we actually used to be just within the College of Natural Sciences, and everyone on campus back in the 80s and 90s was like, oh, it'd be so great to apply computer science to biology. And they did, and we got things like bioinformatics, where you're doing biology, but computationally just with data, not with organic matter. It's incredible. But then someone realized, why limit computer science to just the sciences? It has so much to say to everything else. It's almost like a cliche to take your favorite field and say, just put the word computational in front of it. Computational journalism, computational ecology, computational humanities, computational sociology. I work in digital forensics, which you can think of as computational justice. That's one way to think of it. So anyway, what I'm trying to say is that even though there's this massive change in computer science, which I'll talk about, and this ability to connect to any other field that you're interested in, the principles and what we do algorithmically have not changed. And that's what we teach in the BS degree. And it's actually amazing to me that 90% of what the students learn in our bachelor's degree is basically what I learned in my undergraduate degree in computer science. So these things are different than mathematics, different than other sciences. It's really a way of thinking about the world. And so that's what our BS degree is. Now, different from that, we have a bachelor's in informatics, which is new at UMass and really new at other colleges around the country. And you could think of this as more of applying these principles to the design, application, and use, and to have an impact on computational technology. So maybe one is more of a core theoretical degree. I don't really want to call it that, but maybe just in comparison to the informatics side, which is much more about being applied. So you might think of it as like, I want to use computers in what I want to do, and I don't really want to develop new techniques in computer science, then maybe informatics is for you. But if you think I want to, learn these core principles and I want to switch around during my career, I want to switch jobs all the time. I want to start in healthcare. I want to go to a game design company. I want to work for the government when I'm done. Maybe computer science is for you. That said, as anyone on this call will tell you, your education really just gets you your first job anyway, right? From there, your career takes you elsewhere. You learn what you need to know in the next job. So this is just the first step. And then of course, we have a master's and PhD program. I have a note down on the bottom left for myself. I want to tell you, I think this is like a secret among professors, and I don't think students know this somehow, but transfer to UMass, we love transfer students. We love transfer students in particular from STIC and HCC and GCC. These students, transfer students who have spent 2 years in community colleges, are the most serious students that you will ever meet. They And I'll just say it frankly, like a lot of them have paid for their education and they're not there to like socialize. And I mean, that's a fun part of college, like that's true, but students who transfer are the most serious I've ever met and are determined in a way that I think, not to put down four-year students, they're not all bad, but I just think uniformly, if I hear someone's a community college student who has transferred to UMass, I perk up and I think this person knows what they're doing. And I really encourage you to transfer to us. You may not even know, but the state system of UMass campuses is designed to coordinate with the community college campuses that are around the state. And we have what are called articulation agreements, all sorts of processes in place. And I recommend, even if you're in high school and you're planning to go to community college, or you're in your first year or even second year, it's never too late. But as early as possible, come talk to us at UMass and plan out the courses you're taking at your community college so that the transfer to UMass is as easy as possible. So please do that. We love you. Okay, so we have so many courses at UMass. I didn't even know where to start, and my field is in security. So I thought I would just give you a sampling of some of the security courses we offer. Digital forensics, security engineering, computer and network security, computer crime law. I love the fact that, by the way, I would never take a programming class from a law professor, but as a computer scientist, you can teach the law. And the reason is you're not trying to get students to pass the bar. You're trying to educate them about principles in our society, about justice, and a way of reasoning that we share actually in computer science. We do applied cryptography. We have applied networking labs. We talk about what's called penetration testing, which is basically ethical hacking. We do reverse engineering. Imagine you're working for a company and everybody starts bringing in a Fitbit or a little toy that starts to speak and has Bluetooth. Should you really allow these little ubiquitous devices to enter into your business? Maybe they're secretly stealing information or open up a door for you. Well, it's the job of people, especially in large companies, to examine these devices, open them up, and reverse engineer and see if they cause a security threat. That's a really hard thing to do in a great class, and so on. So lots of classes there that are really of interest. I also want to, one of the things I want to say today is that you should do what you love, and that's what will keep you going from day to day. But the great thing about science and computer science in particular, but definitely all the sciences, as Trisha said, you get, especially in graduate school, you can get paid to go to school. Well, not only that, when you graduate, you'll make a really good living. So for the undergraduates, our undergraduates who graduated from our computer science program, on the left, you can see the companies that they regularly go to work for: Amazon, Google, lots of Massachusetts companies like Mass Mutual, and in the New England area, Liberty Mutual and Fidelity, lots of security companies, including Raytheon, Carbon Black, Rapid7, really great places to work. Not only that, a lot of our students go to work for government, which we really encourage at UMass. We have a lot of students that have gone to work for national labs, the FBI, the CIA, the NSA, and then what are called FFRDC. So in other words, maybe you've heard of MIT Lincoln Lab or MITRE in central Massachusetts. We have a lot of students go there. And our students, you may think of them as like, oh, did they just go and code somewhere? No, they take jobs in healthcare, in defense, insurance, telecom, investment management. They take research positions in graduate school. They go into computer networking. Some of them go into we have a whole nother separate computer engineering department, by the way. And so as Trisha showed, I know Trisha actually works with some professors in our department, and they work together a lot with the electrical engineering and computer engineering department. So we really have a lot of impact all over campus and all over America's corporations and industries. So check this out. The median starting salary is $90,000 a year. That is insane. That is crazy. I didn't make that much for a long time, but there's such a demand now for computer science and the skills that are required in so many different fields. It's just frankly a well-paying job. So my favorite statistic though is at the bottom. 97% of our class of graduates in 2019 reported being satisfied with their first post-graduation position, which is amazing. So, okay. So another thing I want to point out about our college in particular is that for a long time, we really valued what kind of science that we do. And so the motto of our science, and something our faculty feel very strongly about, is that we do computing for the common good. We don't just do research everyone loves to do research because some problem is pretty, or maybe, I don't know, sometimes you just get funding to do something. That's not what we do. We value that the research that we do is helping society. And we find that, something happened in computer science. Some change happened where, really around the late 90s, where it became not just about figuring out how to process information in the most efficient way, which is interesting, but it became this application into other fields. And it allowed us to really go full force into being not just innovative, not just thinking about education and research, but doing it in a way that contributes to society, to do education that's imbued with ethics and critical thinking. Like I said, you may think like, how is it in these classes you're doing that? But I teach a class on computer crime law, right? Like that's about justice. So that's how these topics get into it. I have a good friend, as I'll talk about in a minute, who took a look at results that that Google was returning. Like, do you ever look at Google Translate? Google Translate will take any language and translate it into another. So he has this great example of how if you put a phrase in, he is a doctor, she is a doctor, he is a nurse, and then you translate it into Turkish. Well, it turns out Turkish doesn't have gender specified pronouns that way. So when you translate it back into English, Google would switch the genders and make the man the doctor and the woman the nurse. And the reason for that is not just that, it's not that somebody at Google is racist. It's that somehow the algorithms that learned what to do inherited some systematic injustice in the data that it was processing, right? Because it looked at how often the sentences were written, and too often it said, this man is a doctor. And so that was like an algorithmic change that had to do with ethics that my friend Yuri pushed, and Google actually tried to fix that, right? They didn't do it well enough, but at least they tried to fix it. So there's a lot of these important ideals in computational thinking that really weren't there in the past. And it's really a chance for you to join and make a difference. So some specific projects that we're working on, I have a friend, professor, a colleague of mine is working on the privacy controls for the 2020 census, one of the most important things that our country is going through right now. And it's this amazing process where the government collects a massive amount of information and then has to somehow release a lot of it. But how can they collect information and then release it? That's a privacy violation. So they make use of this amazing new technology called differential privacy that allows the government to do that in a way that they couldn't do it before. We also work on anti-censorship technology for helping dissidents and repressed regimes. Trisha, as I said, works with people in our department like Deepak Ganesan on wearable computing and healthcare for wellness. We work on quantum-based networking for security during communication, and I personally work on child rescue. So that's a little bit hard to talk about given the context of what we do, but I'll just say what I work on is providing tools for the FBI. Our tools are used by pretty much every federal agency that has a law enforcement mission in the US. Every single state uses tools from my lab to help basically catch bad guys. We build tools for undercover operations. We break dark nets that you hear about on the news. We build tools to detect grooming that happens. And what's going on here is, I know we're living in a pandemic, but child exploitation is endemic, which means that it's widespread and it's chronic, and it's a public health crisis that needs addressing through not only better technology, which is the main focus of our lab, but better policy. And so part of what I try to do is inform policymakers about how to deal with this and what to change about regulations on industry, of which there's almost none, and how we could do things better. Okay, and so these are actually some of the best folks I know. They work with me in my lab. That's Christine Chen on the left, Prasanna Subramanian on the left, right below her, my good friend Brian Lin, who's worked with me for a decade, and Jai Kumar, who just started with me as a professional a year ago, and they're all making an incredible difference doing this. So last thing I'll say is that these are the students who have graduated from me with a PhD. And what's amazing about science is, first of all, they've gone on to become professors themselves and are graduating new students themselves. My professor was a guy named JJ Garcia Luna Sevas at UC Santa Cruz. His advisor was a guy named Franklin Ko. Franklin Ko worked as a professor in Hawaii and was part of the first team to develop wireless communication for the internet. Why? Because they were on Hawaii and the islands were so far apart. They needed that. If you go back and back and back and back, you actually end up with Thomas Edison. is the end of my academic chain. And that's amazing to me that I know people who knew people who knew people who spoke with Edison, right? Okay. So last thing I'll say, because I think I'm out of time, Rena, right? Is to say, there's a lot that I do, and I can't help but just give this public service announcement, given the audience that is here. These are apps that I look at because there's so many horrible things going on these apps that you should run. Don't walk, run away from these apps as soon as possible. I want to tell you, since you're all a little bit older, it's not the case that like old creepy guys are on these apps and trying to meet you. Old creepy guys are pretending to be your age on these apps and trying to meet you. And they will stream video of themselves as young people and pretend that they are, and there's even a case I know where people hacked, a perpetrator hacked into an account and then messaged the friends and said, hey, it's me, give me your password. And lots of terrible things go on here. You should really be careful out there. It's pretty sophisticated, the people that are out there. So I think I'm about out of time, but that's all I'll say. And I took a very similar path to Trisha, and it was amazing and totally well worth it. And I got paid to do it, and I left school with no loans, and you should absolutely do the same. Okay, thanks.
You're on mute, Rena.
Thank you, Brian. We learned so much. I'm going to go check on my teenagers. Like that's the thought. You know, like the doors are closed. I have a lot of things to do after your talk. So our next speaker is Dr. Molly from Baystate. Molly?
Good morning, everybody. Hi, I'm just trying to find my PowerPoint to share my screen. Good. Okay, great. Thank you so much for having me today, Rena. I really appreciate your invitation and the opportunity to speak to all of you this morning. And thank you so much for both of your stories, Brian and Trisha. It is so fun to listen to what you all do, your energy, the paths that you've taken. And mine, I think, has probably been a little more winding than most. And so I'm going to talk about that a bit. But I'll start by talking about what I do now. I am a general pediatrician at 140 High Street right here in downtown Springfield. And that means that what I do is practice primary care for children ages birth through young adults. So maybe some of you even still come to our practice. I'm also the associate program director for our residency program. So we take people who've gone to med school and we turn them into pediatricians over the course of 3 years. I'm also the school physician for the Springfield Public Schools, and in that context, I get to work closely with the nursing leadership and the athletic directors to create policies and to maximize health in our school system here in Springfield. So 140 High Street, these are just a few pictures of our clinic. We really take a team approach. We take care of mostly kids from the city. And we're really trying to take care of the whole child in the context of their family, in the context of their community. And so that doesn't just mean treating ear infections and giving shots. That really means also thinking about what makes kids healthy and what makes them well and what helps them thrive. And so that means thinking about things like, do kids have access to healthy food? Do kids have a safe place to live? Are they getting the support they need to get a good education? Are they and their parents getting mental health support and support for traumas that many of our families have been through? And so in the last 5 or 6 years, we've started a small food pantry. We have a diaper bank. We have a care coordination team, and we have integrated mental health support for families. And I think that is a huge step in the right direction towards really becoming a part of the community and a community resource, and not just an office that's located in the community. And then this is, of course, how in some ways over the last 7 months, our job has changed. So this is a picture of a testing tent, a COVID testing tent outside of our site where you can drive up and get tested in your car for COVID. This is what happens when you come into our office, that everyone is screened and asked COVID symptom questions and screened with a temperature check. And then this is my little office where I'm sitting right now, where I'm doing a ton of telehealth. And that is really new for me, which we weren't really doing at all before the pandemic. And now I see probably at least half of my patients on video conferencing software and through telehealth. So life has changed a lot in the last 6 months for a lot of us. But I wanted to tell you a little bit about the path to becoming a doctor in general. I love that Trisha said that, and who else said this? Said that they were thinking about becoming a doctor and that they started out as pre-med, and I think a lot of people do. So you could do that through going to college and taking pre-med courses, taking the prerequisites, which when I went were a year of biology, a year of chemistry, a year of organic chemistry, and a year of physics. Then you would go ahead and you would take the MCAT, which is the med school admission test. You go to med school for 4 years, and the first 2 years are preclinical years where you do a lot more science coursework, biochemistry, pathophysiology, physiology, anatomy, which I loved. I'm shocked that you didn't love that, Trisha. But anyway, so much fascinating about the human body. And then the second 2 years, the third and fourth year of med school, are your clinical years. And so I went to Tufts and then came back here to Baystate to do my clinical years. And that's when you rotate through all kinds of different specialties like surgery, psychiatry, OBGYN, pediatrics, adult medicine, family medicine. So you get a chance to really try out lots of different specialties before you decide. And then you decide what you want to do after med school. You decide what kind of doctor you want to be, and you apply for residency. And so residency can be as little as 3 years, or as long as the surgeons do, like 5 to 7 years. And if you want to specialize beyond that, then you can go ahead and do fellowship, which can be either 1 to 5 years. So it's a long road, a long path. And for me, I didn't start off right away because I was one of those people who said science is hard and math is hard. And I think I grew up in a little bit of a different time and place. I grew up in Ohio, and I was going to school in the 70s and 80s. And for girls at that time, especially where I was, I saw zero role models doing, I might have had a female doctor, but I really didn't see my teachers at that time as my women teachers were all like English and foreign languages and things like that. And my science teachers were all men. And I did not feel encouraged to go in that direction. In fact, I didn't feel good at it, right? And so I saw somebody write in the chat, I'm just not good at chemistry. And so I will say that I also felt like I wasn't good at it. So my mom had to sit down with me every night in 10th grade and do my algebra homework. I remember calling her from a payphone. Does anyone know what a payphone is? And telling her that I got a B on my algebra test, and I was so excited. I had a tutor in geometry. I took Algebra 2 in summer school because I was trying to avoid having to take it the whole year. And then when I went to college, I went to a college that didn't have any core requirements. And so I stayed fully away from science and math. I took all kinds of interesting stuff, but no science and math. And so when I graduated from college, I had a bunch of different jobs. I sort of was heading in this kind of social work or human services kind of pathway. And so I worked in a domestic violence shelter, and I worked with homeless families. I ran a small drop-in center in Greenfield for homeless adults. I lived in Japan for 2 years and taught English. So my 20s were really kind of like trying to figure out what am I doing? What do I want to do? And when I was working at this homeless drop-in center in Greenfield, one day a doctor from the local health center came to the drop-in center, and she was doing outreach to the homeless population around tuberculosis exposure. And so that planted a seed for me, because I never knew that a doctor could also care about the community and care about social justice. And I planted a little seed, but it took a while still for it to grow. And I left that job and I went to work at, it was kind of the late 90s, which is when there was a sort of like an internet boom, or .com boom. And even in Northampton, Massachusetts, there were some internet companies. And this company that I worked for built websites for doctors. And so part of my job was to look at their resumes, or their CVs as they're called, and kind of highlight the things on their CVs to go on their websites. And every day I look through these doctors' CVs and think, and read all the things that they had done and read about the things they were doing and think, maybe I could do that. Maybe I could do that. And so I decided to take one class, and I took anatomy and physiology at Holyoke Community College. I took it at night while I was working. And I thought, if it goes well, maybe I'll take another class. And so then I took microbiology, and that went pretty well. And then I had to take chemistry, and that went pretty well. And then I had to take organic chemistry, and even that went well. And then I had to take physics, and I like hit the wall. Because that was not how I thought my brain worked. I had to actually go back and take that math that I had hated. And I did it all at Holyoke Community College. And I will tell you that the professors, I mean, I went to Smith for undergrad. I went to Tufts for med school, some fancy schools. But I will tell you that the experience that I had at Holyoke Community College with those professors and the other students in my classes was the best of my educational career, which has been long, right? I mean, I had been in school for 20 years at least, because those professors really cared about me. And I had to work my butt off to understand some of the material. So I would go to their office hours. I would go to these rooms where students were working together in groups to understand concepts. And there were some students who were taking, these courses several times in order to understand, but they came back to these rooms and they helped each other. I went to the tutoring services at Holyoke Community College. I really, really am a huge advocate for community colleges. And I think that the students it was a huge diverse mix of students, some younger students, some older students who were going back to school. Some people were switching careers. It was just incredibly diverse and rich experience. And so I'm excited for you all that that's where you are, and I think that can really be your launching pad to do whatever you want to do. So finally, after many years, I graduated from med school. I loved pediatrics. I've always loved kids. I still love pediatrics. I have fun every day. I laugh every day in my job. My job challenges my brain. I have to think about what's going on for kids and how is this strange symptom presenting itself? What could it mean? I love my job, and I just have to say it's been a very long road. I had a kid in med school. So I was almost 30 when I went back. I had my first kid when I was a second year in med school. I had twins when I was in residency. Now residency is a time when you work 80 hours a week. So when you have twins in residency, that's not good timing. And so I don't recommend that you do that. But I'll just say, for those of you who have children already or who are planning to have children, that happens, and that's okay. And it's actually great because you create your own little support system. So just a few words. The path can be very winding. You do not have to take the straight arrow path. And if your education has been interrupted, or if you are switching careers, or if you don't know what you want to do, that's okay. You have time. Life is long. And the journey is very rich and beautiful. You're not on anybody else's timeline, and you're not on anybody else's road. And then the other thing that I will say is that you need to maintain a growth mindset. And I know that when we think about whether we are good at something or we're not good at something, that's not actually true. In my physics class is when I learned I need to hit my head against this 100 times before I really understand it. But then I do understand it, and my brain grows and I get smarter, and I firmly believe that that is possible. And so as you work hard and you fail, because everyone in this group who's spoken so far has talked about failures. We've all had failures, and those are opportunities to learn what you need to know and how they say Einstein invented the light bulb. He failed to invent the light bulb 999 times before he finally invented it. Did Einstein invent the light bulb, you guys? No, right? Okay. See, I failed already. And then the other big piece that I think you really need to think about is who is your support team, because none of us have done this alone. And so you do have to do a lot of independent work, but you also need a team around you. And so if your family's supportive, that's awesome. Your partner's supportive, that's great. Your friends, but you need to create that support network. And I think that you have that through STIC. You have a great network of supportive professors and people who are there at the college, administrators. And you need to think about mentoring. So I think that everybody here who's on this call is reaching out to you to offer advice and support and guidance as you go through your own process and follow your own path. And finally, this speaks to what President Cook spoke about it's a long journey. And how do you kind of go through thinking about, okay, 4 years of 4 years of college and 4 years of med school and 5 years of a residency. You can't think about it like that. You just have to think about the day, and you have to think about what you're learning that day and what you're giving back that day. And I think one of the most fun things about my job is that I'm still learning. And I want to go back to school, and I want to go work in Trisha's lab. And I like that, there's so much that is fascinating out there in this field of STEM and of medicine, that you will continue to learn and grow, and your career will continue to change. So just really thinking about this as a journey rather than as a destination or a degree is important. So thank you so much for the opportunity to speak to you all today. I'm wishing you tons of luck, and I'm here if anybody wants to reach out to talk more.
One small question, Marina, if I may. I put in the chat, Dr. Senn-McNally, the value proposition at community colleges of class size. I'm wondering, when you were at Holyoke Community College, that physics class or that micro class, probably less than 30 students, right? So you had a chance to really work directly with that faculty member. I imagine that is a real help for some of these, what we know are complex or difficult subjects.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Very small classes, very close connections. And I would say that not only, you may feel like you're the student who's the 30th student who sits in the back of the class, but if you go to the professor's office hours, or you connect over Zoom, or however you do that now, my experience was that my professors were incredibly open and incredibly helpful to me in my journey. So thanks.
Okay, I suppose it's my turn. Actually, let me just make sure that I have. Can everybody hear me? Hello?
Yes, Carolyn, we can hear you.
Are you seeing my slides?
We don't see your slides yet.
Okay, let me just show again. Thank you. Okay, so first of all, I want to say thank you so much again, Rena. I am really so appreciative of you having me as part of this lineup. I'm learning so much this morning. I have a colleague who passed away as a result of the COVID, and he always said, as a mathematician, there's never a space that he enters where he has not learned. And I am so truly learning from the previous speakers. And so I'm going to share a little bit about me. My talk today, I'm going to label this the known and the unknown, as a part of me talking about how you use mathematics for STEM innovation. Yes? All right, so I'm Carolyn Gardner-Thomas. I am an instructor in the math department at Harvard University. I also co-direct and serve as a research advisor and instructor in the Math for Teaching program, which is a master's program at the Extension School there. I also lecture in the math education department at UMass, where I got my math, science, and learning technologies education. So where do we go from here? I want to talk a little bit about me, and I want to talk about me just because I believe that I embody, I live in a body that you don't typically see in STEM, or we're very underrepresented in STEM, I guess is the way to say this, as a Black immigrant woman in mathematics, right? So my early years was in Antigua, where I was born. Very strong family influence in mathematics. So that's where my mathematics background sort of got its support. My father, who was hardly in school, the legend is that he, at age 11, when he took his exams for secondary school, was #1 in the country, even though he hadn't gone, attended school a whole lot, because he had to take care of his younger siblings. He was one of 11 children at that time, and he was the eldest. So when my early experiences with my father was that it was all about mathematics. Schooling was about mathematics. So I came up with this love of math from my family, though I didn't know exactly what I wanted to do with it. Fast forward a little bit, in secondary school, my parents migrated to St. Thomas. And in St. Thomas, it was a very different experience for me. So I'm calling this my diverse perspective on the world, because I got to St. Thomas, missed Antigua a whole lot, but it was in St. Thomas that I really started to look at differences in the world. And the reason why I say this is that St. Thomas was sort of a space where people came to try to get their kids to school, to college, because that was my mother's reasoning for moving the family to St. Thomas, is that she wanted us to be college educated. And while there, you were looked at as the other, right? So this diverse perspective, not being one of many Antiguan children, but one of many students from various places within the Caribbean, really gave me what I consider a diverse perspective. And hopefully my talk will lead into that. You'll understand why I say that. From St. Thomas, I ended up coming up to Amherst, UMass Amherst, where my mother said, "You're going to go be a doctor." Again, from Antigua, I loved math, but in Antigua, we talked about being a doctor or lawyer. That was it. And so I was supposed to come and become a doctor. So I ended up in a zoology pre-med discipline and hated every moment of it. Did not like the biology at all, but was gaining some really significant skills that sort of, was stepping stones for where it is that I ended up. Took me about 4 years, right? So I was a senior when I finally quit UMass. I dropped out, said, I can't do this. I hate this. I don't like the smell of formaldehyde. I can't do this. I went out to work in the real world, working in payroll and, little odds and ends jobs here, but really, really missed the mathematics that I was engaging in. So I went back to school, and the school that I went back to was stcc, STIC. Right. So I'm a STIC alum, proud STIC alum. And I wondered, what is it that I could use from my pre-med experience that would sort of would help me to not have to start over. And so chem engineering was it. I mean, the organics and all of the other classes that I already taken in zoology pre-med, I could transfer those. And so I started engineering transfer at STIC. And it was there that I learned CAD, because I was working for a little company out in Westfield, where I learned Pro Engineer, a lot of the engineering classes I took there at STIC, and then went back to UMass, transferred back into UMass after that. is where I got my chemical engineering degree. From there, I went out and I worked in engineering for a little bit. I'll talk about that for a bit. But then again, was somewhat not quite feeling comfortable. I mean, I really liked the idea of engineering. I loved working in engineering, I liked what I did, but it was the math that kept calling me, the math portion of it. And I coupled that with some life experiences that sort of pushed me back into math education. One, my son being born with autism and had challenges in the classroom. And so I became a fierce advocate for the classroom being a welcoming space for everybody. And particularly the math space. And so I went into, as an engineer in North Carolina, I went back into the classroom to teach mathematics from a real world perspective. And that led me to my graduate studies. I came back up to Amherst, the Amherst area, and I went to Smith College and did a master's degree in math and education in order to strengthen my teaching in mathematics. From there, I taught again in mathematics, and while I was doing that, not only in Northampton and Amherst, I decided that I needed to go further and really, just solidify all of these pieces I had. So I had the pre-med and the science thing going on. I had the engineering going on, and then there was, my love of math. And so the best way that I knew to really fuse those together was in a STEM education Ph.D, where I really focused on looking at how the math space itself welcomes people that look like me. So my research really looks at how do we strengthen STEM identities in the math classroom. And in fact, my research was conducted with the study that I did while I was at HCC, and I'll talk about HCC in a little bit as well. Okay, so that's my background in terms of my education. My working career, I did work as a chemical engineer in New York once I was done my engineering degree at UMass. So I was using math in the real world. And then once I decided that I really wanted to teach math and really understand the math space, I went back and I taught high school. I taught high school for some 14, 15 years. And all of this was while I was getting my various degrees, right? So teaching mathematics and access for math, which, for me is where I got, that experience of the unknown. And then finally I ended up in academia. Right now I am at Harvard. Like I said, I'm the director of a Math for Teaching program, which is a master's program. I also teach math and math education. And I'm the research advisor for master's thesis projects. So I work with students who are thinking and wrestling with ideas about math and math education and where we can use math education. Okay, and so as a caveat, the STEM Starter Academy, I am just I have nothing but positive to say about the STEM Starter Academy. I actually was the director for the STEM Starter Academy at HCC for a little bit. So sort of the arena's counterpart at HCC, where I worked with students and was able to really use my different experience, background, education to support students in STEM. From there, I ended up working at the STEM Diversity Institute, where I was supporting PhD students, or students of color that were pursuing their PhDs in STEM fields. And then in recent years, for the last 3 years, up until maybe about a few months ago, I was the director of the STEM Ambassadors Program at UMass, where we support students of color, students who are first-generation students, LGBT students, students with disabilities in STEM fields. So I want to say that, I'm using what I know, or the knowns about me, which is my education, my experiences, to think about the unknown. So this is why I'm calling this the known and the unknown. And so from there, what do I mean by that? One of my favorite math educators, Schoenfeld, says that much of what we do individually and collectively is shaped by our personal histories, right? And I'll talk just a little bit about that as we go on, right? So what's known about me is my experiences and my education. The unknown is that we don't know where it's going to take me, but I'm going to let the math take me there. So we're going to talk about how math leads you to these STEM innovations. So STEM innovation, if you were to Google the word innovation, you'll find hundreds, maybe even thousands of different definitions, right? It depends on who you ask, right? So in this particular context, I am going to look at STEM innovation as a process. It's a process of using what you know and trying to create what you don't know, or trying to create something new. I once heard a talk that says it's about discovery and intervention. So you discover what's there, right? And when you're in the process of discovering, a lot of times you discover things that you don't quite like. And so you decide, let me invent something that I do like, right? And so when I think about STEM innovation, I'm thinking about discovery and I'm thinking about innovations. I'm thinking about the known and I'm thinking about the unknown. Real action and complex ideas. And this is the symbol that came up for me, right? So everybody, most of you have seen this A+BI, right? Which has a real part and an imaginary part. So it's a mixture of this real action with multiple ideas for innovation, right? Now, why are we doing this? To address complex challenges of today and challenges of tomorrow. So having said that, what is mathematics? And how does that help for STEM innovation? Well, again, it depends on who you talk to. I mean, if you ask the average person on the street what is mathematics, I guarantee you'll get a myriad of definitions of mathematics. I like to think of mathematics as a science, right? So it's a science of detecting patterns in the real world, discovery. I mean, it's all the patterns and seeing things that are alike that we're able to group and create disciplines like chemistry and so on and so forth, right? It's also the science of logic, logic of shape, quantity and arrangement, structure, order, relationship. It's really sense making about the world in which you live, right? I also like to think about mathematics as an interdisciplinary language, right? So like reading or write, math is a very important component of learning, right? And of doing, a way of being. I like to think of mathematics as a discipline, just like chemistry or physics or biology, right? And certainly mathematics as a human endeavor, because we do know that mathematics is created. So why do we count in the base 10? Is it because we have 10 fingers, 10 toes, right? There are places that use different bases. So it's definitely also a human endeavor as well. All right. Let me see if I can get this to move on.
Carolyn,
So yes?
can you make it full screen?
I'm not quite sure why it's not full screen. Because I am seeing it full screen. Let me share again.
I think you may have been sharing the presenter view and not the presentation.
Oh, I am so sorry. I thought you were seeing the full screen.
There you go. You got it now.
Yes.
Oh my goodness. All right. So mathematics. So for me, what does mathematics offer in terms of STEM innovation, right? It's all about problem solving. So this is just the standards that I pulled out from the NCTM for mathematics, right? It's really making sense of problems and persevering in solving problems. And you heard the previous speakers talk about the idea of problem solving in real life, whether it's in computing or it's in medicine and so on and so forth. It's reasoning and it's proof. It's really thinking critically about the things that we wrestle with in real life, right? And so for me, mathematics is one of those disciplines that really prepare you in order to solve or to discover and invent, right? So mathematics for STEM innovation, all of the standards that we look at in mathematics are leading you to STEM innovation, connections, representation, modeling with real mathematics, right? Modeling real world with mathematics. You look at this COVID situation that we're faced with today. Quite a bit of what we look at as a graphs, like how is the trend going? Like you see it goes up, where's the peak? What does that mean? And being able to wrestle with those. So using and developing practices or building habits to solve problems to benefit society is what I think about when I think about STEM innovation. And this is what mathematics prepares you for, okay? Mathematics for STEM innovation, we need you. We need people that look like you, with all of you, all of who you are, your unique identities and intersectionalities of identities. We have lots and lots of problems that we need to solve. Right now we're in the midst of a health crisis. So tons of health crises that we need to look at: climate challenges, food, water insecurity, equitable access to education. The list is quite long, and we really do need you. And we need you in particular because you are who you are, right? So if you're an immigrant, Black, woman, like myself, right? We need your experiences. We need your backgrounds. And this is the way in which we're going to be able to solve problems, is that all of us together, bringing together what it is and who we are.
Springfield Technical Community College, ST